Please be seated. The floor is now given to the defense team for Mr. Nguyen Chia. You will have one session to put questions. Counsel.
Thank you, Mr. President. Just to be clear,
President, you may proceed first. Lawyer for civil parties.
Merci, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you, Mr. President. We discussed with the co-prosecutors during the recess, and we would like 10 minutes to pose follow-up questions on civil party marriages. This time would obviously be taken away from the time that the co-prosecutor has to speak. We believe it's more logical to first ask our questions and then leave the time for the defense, but it's obviously up to your judgment. And if you would like us...
President, I understand, but you can wait when the co-prosecutor is questioning, because that's for the purpose of arrangement of the time. And Counsel for Nguyen Chia, you may now proceed.
I'm not sure if that's very logical, but just to be sure, Mr. President, the defense has 2 sessions, so we will be using 2 sessions, but we will divide it in such a way that I might be using most of the time of those 2 sessions. Mr. Civil Party, good morning to you. Let me ask you first some questions about what you did in 1974 and 1975. Did I understand you correctly when you said this morning you were involved in the battle for the liberation of Phnom Penh in 1974 and 1975?
That is correct.
And did I also understand that the forces that you were a member of were trying to cut off supplies coming from the Mekong River to Phnom Penh, to Lon Nol forces? Is that my understanding?
Answer. Your understanding is correct.
Could you describe a bit in more detail as to what your battalion or company or division did exactly? Who was your commander? Were you involved in the actual battle? Can you be a little bit more specific as to what you did during the fight for the liberation of Phnom Penh in '75?
Thank you, Counsel. I would like to describe the battles along Mekong River. I cannot recall the names or the names of my commanders. I was simply a combatant as long as I had the orders. The head of a company, company K, his name is Mat. And as for the chief of the battalion, his name is Chon. I could only recall these names. And the battlefield that I was engaged in was to prevent the supplies by ship on the river. The transportation of supplies would take place once a week. So I had to be on guard and defense that from Chrui, Songwa to Sambur, Kokkao, and Bangkrum. That were the battlefields which I was engaged in, and I was there to cut off supplies for Lunol forces. And those supplies were transported by Tilki forces into Phnom Penh. That's all, Council.
And what was your specific role? Were you involved in shooting those convoys? Were you involved in trying to sink those convoys? What exactly was your function? What was your duty as a soldier?
Civil Party. Thank you, Council. I am simply a combatant in a group within the liberated forces, and I had no specific role or duty. I was only posted at those battlefields.
Was your unit or company or battalion subsequently involved in the actual liberation of Phnom Penh? Did you enter Phnom Penh with other forces?
Thank you, Council. My force was actually within battalion 148. We were tasked to fire the convoys transporting supplies from the southern Vietnam. We were posted along the Mekong River, but not within the Phnom Penh. We were tasked to defend the convoys transporting supplies on the river, and my battalion was 148. We were there to fire the convoys or ship transporting supplies by Tilki soldiers from Vietnam. I was not posted within the territory of Phnom Penh.
I understand, but also after 17 April 75, once Phnom Penh had been liberated, were you at one point in time stationed in Phnom Penh? I mean, after 17 April 75?
Answer. By then, my unit was stationed on the Kokkao Island. Our arms were removed after the 17 April 1975. We were stationed on Kokkao Island. We were tasked to grow vegetables and dig the earth within my battalion.
Would it be correct to say that your battalion, Battalion 148, was part of the East Zone forces?
You're asking me, Counsel?
Yes, your battalion 148, was that part of the East Zone forces led by Sao Pim, Heng Samrin and others? Were you part of the East Zone forces in 74, 75?
Thank you, Counsel. After the liberation, my battalion was designated number 148 under the command of the East Zone. And my battalion was stationed along the river as I have just indicated.
Do you know one of the East Zone commanders, Heng Samrin?
Back then, the forces of Ta Heng Samrin, which were engaged in Chiroi Chire, were so active. My force was asked to get ready and be prepared at Chiroi Chire to reinforce Ta Heng Samrin forces. I mean, to reinforce his division, and I cannot recall the number of his division. But I know that that forces belong to Ta Heng Samrin.
Were you part of his division, or was your battalion only there to reinforce his division, and were you yourself part of another division?
Answer. My battalion was under command of the East Zone. My unit was not under the command of his division. The western part of Chiroi Chire, in fact, at that location, there were forces of Lunol, and it was difficult for our forces to attack and to defeat Lunol forces. And at the time, Ta Heng Samrin requested my battalion to go and reinforce his division. And at Chiroi Chire, it was near the Mekong River, and my unit was asked to reinforce his division.
Have you ever heard of any clashes after 17 April 75 in Phnom Penh between East Zone forces and Southwest Zone forces?
At the time, I used to hear that the Southwest forces were tasked to attack into Phnom Penh, and the same applies to the East forces. However, we were attacking from different directions. The forces of the Southwest and the East were not cooperating well with one another, because the Southwest forces accused and criticized the East forces. For the East forces or soldiers, we wore khaki uniform, and Southwest soldiers wore black uniforms. And Southwest soldiers, as I said, blamed and criticized the East forces. However, we were attacking from a different direction into Phnom Penh.
But have you heard of clashes between forces of the Southwest and the East Zone in Phnom Penh right after the liberation? And have you heard of clashes between Southwest forces and East Zone forces in 1973?
Could you please repeat your question? I cannot recall and cannot hear the name clearly, for example, Phnom Penh.
Yes, there were actually two questions in one. Again, have you heard of armed clashes between Southwest Zone forces and East Zone forces in Phnom Penh right after the liberation of 17 April 75?
Thank you, Counsel. After the liberation of 1975, my unit was stationed at Rumbiasaw, Kakrum, Bokau, and I heard the gunfire. The sounds of gunfire was so intensified and could be heard all across my location. I, by the time, did not know whether or not complete victory had won by the Khmer Rouge forces. And after the fall of Phnom Penh, I could hear the gunfire like a Saravan, a melody that is the Khmer melody. Before that, I could hear not so loud gunfire, but later on I could hear the sounds of heavy shelling and heavy firing as well. And a little while later, I learned that Phnom Penh had been completely liberated.
My last question on this subject. Do you know of any clashes between Southwest Zone forces and East Zone forces in 1973, so already 2 years before the liberation of Phnom Penh?
I was not aware of that at that point in time, since I was further from Phnom Penh. I was at Kokkav Island, and in the East Zone there were divisions of infantry who participated in the attack. However, my unit was stationed through guards the waterway and to interrupt the supply to Phnom Penh.
You mentioned Da Heng Samrin as one of the East Zone Forces commanders. Do you know any other East Zone Forces commanders other than Heng Samrin?
No, I don't. I was a low-ranking combatant. I only knew my direct superior, that is commander of my battalion. That's the highest level that I knew. As for the division belonging to Ta Heng Samrin, I asked soldiers who participated in the attack That's how I knew about it. About the forces of Ta Heng Samrin, that have I learned of his name, and I never saw him in person. I only learned of his name through his combatants, the low-ranking combatants who spoke of his name.
Do you know Heng Samrin's older brother, Heng Samkai?
At that time, I did not know of his name, or maybe my memory does not serve me well now.
Before I move to 1978, let me ask you one or two questions about the name of the forces that you belong to. I heard you say earlier this morning that, quote unquote, the Khmer Rouge forces tricked us. In your answer 15 of document E3/9467, you said, I joined the movement of Sao Pim, quote unquote, in order to fight the Khmer Rouge. But in 1975, when you were attacking Phnom Penh, or where you were involved in the destruction of the logistics to Phnom Penh, weren't you yourself also a member of the Khmer Rouge forces?
At that time, I was a member of the Liberation Army, and I did not know at the time whether we were so known as the Khmer Rouge forces.
I understand that answer. But when you say in answer 15, the party committee of Sao Pim agitated us to rearm by withdrawing us from that work site. And then you say, I joined that movement in order to fight the Khmer Rouge. Are you implying that the East Zone forces, or that Sao Pim or Heng Samrin were not Khmer Rouge?
At the time, I did not know whether Heng Samrin's forces were Khmer Rouge. In fact, his forces were in the same condition as my unit, because we belonged to the East Zone forces. And when Sao Pim agitated the movement, he agitated it amongst the forces of the East Zone only in order to fight against the Southwest and West forces who came to surround us in order to kill us, the East Zone soldiers.
So am I to understand that it's only the Southwest and the West Zone forces that you call Khmer Rouge forces, and that you yourself were never part of the Khmer Rouge force, even when you were involved in the liberation of Phnom Penh?
It is difficult for me to distinguish which force actually attacked Phnom Penh. What I could see that I belongs to the troops, which are parts of the resistance movement initiated by Samdech Sihanouk, and we were known by the National Liberation Force or Army. As for the broad term of the Khmer Rouge, I could not tell you about that. I knew that the Southwest soldiers came through our zone with the intention of killing us.
Let me move on, Mr. Civil Party, and let's go to the incitement or agitation by Sao Pim. In question and answer 17 of document E3/9467, you said that the movement was organized quickly and spontaneously while being surrounded by aircraft, tanks and infantry. What exactly do you mean with quickly and spontaneously?
Thank you, Councillor, for asking that question. President interrupts. Lead co-lawyer for civil parties, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. President. A short remark. In the French version of the document, the word spontaneously does not appear. Indeed, the movement quickly took form, but I don't know what the exact translation is from the Khmer. But spontaneously does not exist in the French version, so that is quite a difference as far as I see it.
I do not know what's in the Khmer version. Let me read the whole answer. 17. About 8,000 people joined the movement. This movement was organized quickly and spontaneously while being surrounded by aircraft, tanks and infantry.
Councillor, I think we need to clarify that, since you again confront him with a translation which might be a problem. We are having the Khmer here on the bench.
The chamber will read his private statement in the Khmer language, and it reads: This movement was organized quickly while being surrounded by aircraft, tanks and infantry. That's how the movement was organized.
Then let's drop the word spontaneously. I have no problem with that. Mr. Civil Party, what did you mean when you said the movement was organized quickly? What does the word quickly mean?
Thank you, Council. I do not have any further understanding of you on this matter. However, the agitation took place very quickly, and I did not know how it was organized. He says that the Southwest and West soldiers came to surround the East Zone soldiers with the intention to kill them.
Very well, let's see if we can pin it down in time a bit. This call from Sao Pim, which you refer as instigation to struggle against the regime, the incitement or the agitation, was that done by Sao Pim on or around 25th of May 1978.
I would just suggest that the witness
Yes, co-prosecutor, you have the floor.
suggest the witness first be asked a date before it's suggested to him.
Well, he has offered 1978 already, but I'm happy to ask it again in an open way. The incitement, the call from Sao Pim to incite, agitate, whatever you would like to call it, when was that done exactly?
I have stated that it happened in around 1978. However, I cannot tell you the exact date. As I stated at the time, I did not have a calendar or a watch to refer to. And my statement was based on the season of cultivation of rice.
I understand that you do not know an exact date, but let me try it differently. Do you remember approximately the time when Sao Pim and Ye Karo committed suicide? Do you know when that was?
From my estimation, that happened in 1978. Because the southwestern soldiers attacked the provincial town of the East Zone during that year, and after that he shot himself to death. And I did not hear that on the radio communication. However, I only heard him asking us to rise up and to resist the attack. However, we were overwhelmed by the forces, and after that I could no longer hear his voice on the radio. At that time, I was next to a commander on the ground, and that's how I learned about that event. So after we no longer heard of his voice, we surrendered. We laid our arms.
But this first call from Sao Pim to rebel, how many days was that before his suicide? Do you know?
From my knowledge, that is after I was sent from Koh Kaeu to the area where the movement of agitation took place, it was about a week. Because after that there were gun fight at the provincial town. That is after an announcement or appeal by the Southwest and the West groups through the dropping of tracts and leaflets from the plane for us to surrender. And as I said, by that time his voice was no longer heard.
Could it be that the call from Sao Pim was on or around the 25th of May, about 8 days before his suicide?
Also, as I have stated, I do not know the exact date. I did not know whether when we let down our arms, it happened 7 or 8 days after the initiation of the movement.
Now let me go back in time a little bit. Have you ever heard of a visit from Pol Pot to the East Zone in January, maybe February 1978? In other words, 5 months before the uprising, 4 to 5 months.
I did not hear such news. I myself did not even know Pol Pot. I was a simple combatant and I did not know about such affairs.
When Southwest or West Zone forces distributed leaflets calling Sao Pim a traitor, did they also say or write something about Vietnam?
They surrounded us. They said that through the Sao Pim's movements, the East Zone forces colluded with the Yun side. I did not know whether that was their pretext in order to get rid of us, the East Zone forces. They arrested and killed military commanders of the East Zone forces, and they all disappeared.
But did they give any specific details as to what consisted of the collusion between East Zone forces and Vietnam? When did this start, according maybe to the leaflets? Where did it exist of? Did you hear anything in May about what Vietnam had done or what the plans of Vietnam were in relation to East Zone forces?
At the time when I read the tract leaflet, the main content was about the treason committed by Sao Pim and Ye Caro, and they made an appeal to us, the forces and the people living in the East Zone and in the provincial town of Prey Veng to surrender. But I do not recall whether there was any mentioning of the collusion with the Yun side. However, the phrase was used by Sao Pim during his agitating of the movement.
Let me ask you differently. Have you ever heard then, or maybe much later, that in early 1978 the Vietnamese had made plans to overthrow the DK government?
Not.
After the liberation in 1979, I received news that Vietnamese forces joined hands with Khmer forces to liberate the country from the Khmer rules regime.
I understand, but had you heard in early '78, before the uprising, that Vietnam had made plans to overthrow the government of Democratic Kampuchea? Or even in 1977 already?
At that time, I did not hear anything about that, or about any plans that Vietnam initiated to overthrow the Khmer rules.
What was it exactly that Sao Pim said in reaction to the accusations of treason? Do you remember what he said after being accused of colluding with the Vietnamese and treason?
I did not know about that. I did not know from whom or from which he received such information.
No, but my question was, do you know how he reacted to the accusation of treason and collusion with the Vietnamese?
Counsel, please repeat your question again. Are you referring to the information from the Southwest and the West side group, or whether from the East Zone group?
Well, I'm trying to understand what exactly happened in May '78. You're saying Sao Pim called upon everyone to revolt against the Southwest and the West Zone forces. He apparently, is what you're saying, might have been accused of treason and colluding with the Vietnamese. Do you remember what Sao Pim said in reaction to that accusation?
Because at the time I was a simple combatant, and my knowledge was limited. For that reason, I did not know about his reaction to such accusation.
In that answer that I just read out to you earlier, answer 17 in document E3/9467, you said that, quote unquote, about 8,000 people joined the movement that was fighting the Khmer Rouge. Where did you get that number from, about 8,000?
That is my own estimate, because many people participated in the movement, and that is in every spearhead in the East Zone, as well as in the provincial town of Prey Veng province. there were many people who involved in the activity of the movement in Prey Veng province at the time. At the spearhead where my unit was based, people from all kinds of sections took part in, including those patients, including the people in the hospital and other sections.
I understand. I think I understand. You're trying to say that according to you, everyone reacted positively to Sao Pim's call, but what makes you say 8,000 people, and why not 80,000 or 800,000? What made you say 8,000? Because that seems a bit little, a small number in relation to your answer.
As I said, this is my own estimate, and it might not be the correct figure of all the forces who joins the movement. For that reason, you need to take all the figures from all units involved, and I was only part of a unit, and I could observe the involvement of people in the Prey Veng provincial town, and as I said, everyone in the East Zone forces involved in the movement, and we try to counterattack in all spearheads in Prey Veng province. And I do not know whether my own estimate here is more or less the figure.
Maybe one last question for the break, if you allow me, Mr. President. Was it your observation that besides all Eastern Zone forces, also all or most civilians joined the uprising?
I could say that the uprising in my spearhead, that is to the eastern part of Prey Veng, at the Mae Bon Bridge and along the National Road, there were present of soldiers. However, I cannot tell you about the presence of either soldiers or civilians in the other spearheads, or whether civilians took part in the movement. Thank you, Council. It is now time for a lunch break. We take a break now and resume at 1:30 this afternoon to continue our proceedings. Court officer, please assist the civil party at the waiting room reserved for experts, witnesses, and civil parties, and invite him back into the courtroom at 1:30 this afternoon. Security personnel, you are instructed to take his pawn to the waiting room downstairs and have him returned to attend the proceedings this afternoon before 1:30. The court is now in recess.